"You can sleep in the garage," my mother-in-law said after I lost my job. My husband nodded and handed me a pillow, like that was all I was worth. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply took the pillow and walked into the cold, oil-stained garage without a word. But silence is not weakness. The next morning, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. It did not just take the furniture, it took everything, including the house, because what they never realized was that while they were trying to break me, I was already 10 steps ahead. And my husband, he never bothered to read the deed I had him sign. This is not just a story about betrayal. It is a story about strategy, silence, and the moment a woman reclaims every inch of what is hers. My name is Amelia Warren, and I am 32 years old. Until last month, I thought I had the kind of life that made people jealous. I had a husband, a decent job in a marketing firm, and a small but cozy home in a quiet Virginia suburb. I used to believe love meant weathering storms together. But sometimes it is the storm that reveals who is really standing beside you and who is hiding behind the curtains, waiting for you to drown. My husband's name is Tyler. He is 35, tall, charming, and good with words. The kind of man who can make a stranger feel like his best friend within 5 minutes of talking. That was what drew me to him in the first place. His warmth, his confidence. We met during a friend's engagement party, and 6 months later, we were married. He introduced me to his mother, Joyce, about a week before our wedding. That should have been my first warning. Joyce was elegant, in a sharp, cutting way. She smiled with her mouth, but never her eyes. She wore pearls, even to casual brunches, and spoke like the world owed her something. From the first moment, I sensed she did not think I was good enough for her son. She told me my job was cute, and that I would be better off staying home to learn how to make proper beef Wellington. Tyler laughed it off. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to believe she would grow to like me. After the wedding, Joyce began visiting every weekend. She brought her own food, criticized our furniture, and insisted on rearranging the living room to make it less depressing. Tyler never pushed back. He said, "She is just trying to help," or "She has good taste, you have to admit." I let it go again and again, brushing off the jabs. I loved him. I wanted peace. Then 3 months ago, everything changed. The company I worked for had been struggling. Layoffs were happening left and right. I tried to stay hopeful, working overtime, volunteering for projects, even mentoring junior staff. But none of that mattered. I was called into HR on a grey Tuesday morning and told my position was being eliminated. My severance package was small, and I left the building with a cardboard box and a pit in my stomach. When I told Tyler, he just blinked. He asked if I had any interviews lined up. I said no, not yet. It had only been a few hours. His face shifted, like he was already disappointed. Then he told his mother. Joyce came over that night. She sat on our couch like a queen on a throne, sipping wine while I stood in my own kitchen like a stranger. She did not say she was sorry or ask how I felt. Instead, she leaned back and said, "Well, since you are not working, you might want to start contributing in other ways. Laundry has been piling up." Tyler just kept sipping his beer. I asked him later if he thought that was appropriate. He shrugged. She is right. We cannot afford to carry dead weight. I spent the next few weeks applying for jobs obsessively. Dozens of applications, dozens of cover letters. Silence. Rejection. Silence again. I was slipping into a quiet kind of panic. But instead of support, I got more side eyes from Joyce and more silence from Tyler. Then came the night that broke me. Joyce had just finished dinner at our place, one that I had cooked. Tyler was watching football. I stood to clear the dishes, and Joyce said casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, "Since you are not bringing in any money and you do not exactly contribute to conversation, perhaps it is time we rethink your sleeping arrangements. You can sleep in the garage. It would give you some space to reflect on your usefulness." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Tyler got up, walked to the hall closet, pulled out a spare pillow, and handed it to me. "I think it is for the best," he said. No emotion, no hesitation. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not there, not in front of them. So I took the pillow. I walked out into the garage. I slept on a rolled-up yoga mat with oil stains beneath my back and silence pressing against the walls like a second skin. But here is the thing they did not know. While they had been looking at me like a burden, I had been planning something of my own. A quiet little idea, born months ago, when Joyce started suggesting Tyler take more ownership of our financial future. I had nodded, smiled, and suggested he put his name on a few documents. He never read them. He just signed where I told him to, including the deed to the house. The house I had bought with an inheritance from my late aunt. The house that legally was mine, and mine alone. Tyler had never checked. Joyce never asked. They just assumed everything in their world belonged to them. And that was their biggest mistake. The morning after they exiled me to the garage, I woke up early. My back ached, and I had barely slept, but I made myself coffee. I sat quietly at the kitchen table as they both came downstairs, still groggy, still smug. Neither said a word to me. At exactly 9:00 a.m., a moving truck pulled into the driveway. The sound of the engine brought Tyler to the window. He frowned, confused. Joyce asked if someone was moving into the neighborhood. I smiled. Then I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it for the movers. They were there for everything: furniture, appliances, artwork, even the light fixtures. I handed them a checklist. Tyler demanded to know what was going on. I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks and said, "You might want to read the deed." He went pale. He ran to the filing cabinet. I heard the shuffle of papers, the frantic sound of realization. He came back into the living room, waving the paper in his hand. "This is a joke," he said. "Tell me this is a joke." But I did not say a word. Joyce looked between us like a fox in a burning henhouse. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I walked past them, out to the front porch, and sat down. The sun was warm on my face. The truck pulled away an hour later. The house stood empty. And then I made one last phone call. To the realtor. Because this house, it was never theirs to exile me from. It was mine to leave behind. I left the house with nothing but my handbag, a sense of justice, and a new set of keys. While Tyler was still pacing through empty rooms, and Joyce was calling her lawyer with trembling hands, I was already 10 miles away, headed to a fully furnished townhouse I had leased under my name 2 weeks earlier. I had always believed in backup plans. Maybe it was the way my parents raised me, or maybe it was the years of subtle cruelty from Joyce that taught me to never get too comfortable. Either way, when I began to suspect that Tyler's love was conditional and his mother's disdain permanent, I opened a separate bank account, a secret one. I began transferring a little every month, quietly, carefully. By the time I lost my job, I had enough saved to start fresh. But I had waited. I had wanted to see if they would choose compassion, if they would stand beside me when I fell. They chose the garage. So now, it was my turn. I spent that first day in my new place, curled on the sofa, not crying but not smiling either. It was like standing in the aftermath of a hurricane, the silence after rage, a strange hollow calm. That night, my phone buzzed. Tyler. I let it ring. Then came the text. "What did you do?" I did not answer. The next morning, I posted a photo of my new kitchen on Instagram. Nothing dramatic, just a cup of coffee on a marble counter, a sunbeam across the tiles, and the caption, "New beginnings taste like freedom." It only took 10 minutes for the comments to start. Tyler's cousin liked the post. His coworker sent a fire emoji, and then I received a DM from someone I had forgotten even existed. Rachel. Rachel had dated Tyler in college. They had a messy breakup, and he always referred to her as that crazy chick. But now she was messaging me saying, "I saw your post. I have something you should know. Can we talk?" I almost ignored it, but something in her tone felt urgent. We met at a cafe downtown that afternoon. She looked different from what I remembered. Stronger, smarter, her voice steady as she slid her phone across the table. "3 months ago," she said, "he reached out to me, said he missed what we had, that you were too boring and not supportive. He tried to get me to meet up with him in a hotel room." I stared at the messages. My breath caught in my throat. He had been preparing his exit before mine had even begun. Rachel continued, "I blocked him after that, but I saw your post and figured you deserved to know." I thanked her, sincerely, and then I walked out of the cafe into the sunlight, my mind spinning. Tyler had not just thrown me into the garage because I lost my job. He had already decided I was disposable. Joyce had just given him the excuse. I drove to my new place, sat on the porch, and stared at the sky. There was this strange sense of peace growing in me. Slow, quiet, but real. Like I had finally stopped shrinking to fit into someone else's version of love. Then came another twist I never saw coming. The next day, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. A calm female voice introduced herself as Danielle Kramer, an attorney representing an estate. She said, "Amelia Warren, you were named as a secondary beneficiary in your Aunt Marion's trust. There was an error in processing the original paperwork, but it has been corrected now. We need to discuss distribution of assets." I blinked. I had already received my inheritance from Aunt Marion. The house, that was it. Danielle continued, "Actually, the trust included significant stock investments that matured last quarter. You are entitled to full control over them." I asked how much. She paused, then she said, "Roughly $487,000. I almost dropped the phone. $487,000. My head spun. I scheduled an appointment to sign the paperwork the next morning. When I hung up, I sat there in stunned silence. I had been sleeping on a yoga mat days ago, and now the universe was handing me a blank slate and a loaded pen. Later that week, while I was still processing the weight of it all, I passed by the old house, just to see it. It was empty, the windows bare, the lawn overgrown already, and parked in front of it was Tyler's car. He was standing in the driveway, yelling into his phone. I could hear his voice, angry, sharp, desperate. Part of me wanted to drive away, but another part, a colder part, parked the car across the street and watched. He slammed his phone down and turned toward the house, kicking a loose rock in frustration. Then his eyes landed on me. I rolled down the window and gave him a small wave. He jogged over. "Amelia, what the hell? You ruined me." I raised an eyebrow. "You signed the papers. You agreed to the deed. You told me to sleep in the garage." He sputtered. "I thought you would fight for us." I stared at him for a long second. "No," I said finally. "You wanted someone to serve you, to clean your house, make your meals, and disappear when things got hard. You did not want a partner. You wanted a maid." He stepped back, mouth opening to argue. I rolled up the window and drove away. Behind me, he shouted my name, but it sounded small, hollow. I did not look back. I thought I was done with Tyler after that last conversation in the driveway. I thought I could finally breathe again, rebuild my life, and leave that chapter behind me. But trouble has a way of lingering like smoke. And Tyler was not the type to lose gracefully. 3 days later, I received a formal envelope in my mailbox. Legal papers. He was suing me for emotional distress and attempting to claim partial ownership of the house, the same house he had abandoned and that I had legally owned before we were even married. At first, I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. Samantha, my attorney, was direct and brilliant. She reviewed the documents, looked through the deed Tyler had signed, and simply said, "He does not have a case, but men like this rarely give up until they are embarrassed publicly." I asked what she meant by that. She smiled and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were screenshots, emails, bank statements. Turns out Tyler had been funneling money to an account that was not his, an account in someone else's name, someone named Mira C. Dalton. Samantha raised her eyebrow. "Does that name mean anything to you?" It did not. At least not right away. But when I searched her on social media later that night, I found her. Mira was a fitness coach in Florida. Gorgeous, blonde, and 26. Her profile was littered with inspirational quotes, protein shake ads, and, most importantly, photos of Tyler. Cozy, happy, and dated months before I even lost my job. So this was not just emotional neglect. This was betrayal. This was calculated. My hands trembled, not with sadness anymore, but with a quiet, simmering rage. While I was cooking dinners and dealing with unemployment stress, he had been flying to Florida, living a second life, bankrolled partly by my money. I sent Mira a message, short and polite. "Hi Mira, I believe we have a man in common. Just a heads up, he is married, or was, until recently." She responded an hour later. "I had no idea. He told me you were his crazy ex who refused to sign divorce papers." She sent a screenshot of a message where Tyler called me a controlling narcissist with anger issues who faked a miscarriage for attention. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. That was the final straw. The miscarriage had happened 2 years ago. It had broken something inside me that I had not even known was fragile, and to know that he was now using it as some kind of manipulation tool. I could not stay silent anymore, so I wrote a post. Not passive, not vague. I told the truth, every piece of it, about the garage, about the pillow, about the moving truck, about the fake persona he presented. I posted screenshots of the deed, the texts, the bank records, and yes, even the photos Mira had shared. Within 24 hours, the post had gone viral. I did not expect it, but apparently the internet loves a woman who flips the script. Thousands of comments poured in, women thanking me for my strength, men apologizing on behalf of his kind, even influencers reposting it with captions like, "She is the blueprint." Tyler? He went silent. His lawsuit was quietly dropped. His attorney likely saw the public disaster and refused to go down with him. But what came next shocked me even more. The following week, I received a call from a woman named Ellen Pierce. She was a producer for a major streaming platform. She said, "We saw your story. Have you ever considered telling it as a limited series, female-led, raw and redemptive? The kind of story people remember." I froze. I had been invisible for so long, dismissed, laughed at, tossed into a garage like garbage. And now, suddenly, I had a voice again, a platform, a purpose. We set a meeting. I walked into that room, not as the girl who cried alone in the garage, but as a woman who owned the ground she stood on. They loved the pitch. They asked if I wanted to be a co-producer. I said yes. A week later, I signed a contract, not just for the show, but for a book deal, and then a podcast interview, and then a speaking engagement at a women's leadership summit. It was like my life cracked open, and light came flooding in. But with all that came one more surprise. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. "I am proud of you. I am sorry I did not say it when it mattered. Dad." My father had passed away 7 years ago. I stared at the letter, hands shaking. It was not his handwriting, but I recognized the signature. It was his. I never told anyone this, but I had once found an old notebook of his, filled with letters he never sent. To me, to my mom, to his brother. He had always struggled to express himself in person, but his written words had weight. This signature was copied from one of those old letters, which meant someone had access to it, someone who knew. I traced it back. My sister. She had kept the notebook when he died. We had not spoken in years. She had always disapproved of Tyler, and when I married him, we drifted apart. I called her. When she answered, there was silence. Then she said, "It was time someone reminded you who you were before him." I cried for the first time in months, because I remembered, and I was finally her again. Just when I thought the storm had passed and the ground beneath me was finally stable, something else shifted. It began with a knock on my front door. I had just returned from a strategy meeting with the studio. The show based on my story was already in pre-production. Casting had begun, and there were whispers of streaming deals. My life had taken a turn I could never have imagined while sleeping on a yoga mat in a cold garage. The knock came again, sharp, insistent. I opened the door to find a woman in her late 40s standing with a manila folder clutched to her chest. Her face was unfamiliar, but there was something urgent in her eyes. "Amelia Warren?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I am Deborah Haskins. I am an independent estate investigator. May I come in?" I hesitated. She quickly added, "It is regarding your Aunt Marion's assets." I let her in. She placed the folder on my coffee table and sat down carefully, like every move mattered. "I have been following your story," she said. "I watched your podcast. What your ex-husband and his mother did was horrific. But what caught my attention was the trust your aunt left behind." I furrowed my brow. I thought everything had already been resolved. Deborah opened the folder. "Not everything. There is something else, something hidden." She pulled out documents, bank records, handwritten notes, and a photocopy of an old letter. In it, Aunt Marion mentioned something called the Farrow Fund. "I believe your aunt created a secondary account, separate from the main trust. It was meant to be accessed only if certain conditions were met." "What kind of conditions?" I asked, my voice low. "She wrote that this fund was reserved for the moment you realized your own strength." I sat frozen. The account was hidden under an alias, but Deborah had traced it. It existed. And the balance? Over $2 million. I could not speak. My aunt had always been eccentric, private, wise in a quiet way. She had never married, never had children of her own. But she had loved me deeply, that I knew. I just never imagined she had planned something this big, for a future she suspected I would need. Deborah smiled gently. "She believed in you more than you believed in yourself." I was silent for a long time after she left, but the peace did not last. That weekend, Tyler showed up at a panel I was speaking at, in front of the audience. He waited until I finished speaking, then stood up during the Q&A and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Do you feel good about destroying someone who once loved you?" Gasps echoed across the room. I kept my face calm. "Do you feel good about cheating on someone who trusted you?" I asked back, steady and measured. He blinked. I continued, "Do you feel good about letting your mother speak to me like I was a stray dog? About handing me a pillow and sending me to sleep on concrete?" The audience went completely silent. "You can walk away now, Tyler," I said, "or you can stay and hear how the rest of the story ends, but either way, it will not include you anymore." He left, his face red, fists clenched. After the panel, one of the producers approached me and asked if they could add that entire moment to the series. I said yes. The truth matters, even the ugly parts, but another twist was waiting for me, one that would not come from my past, but from the future I thought I had under control. One morning I received an email. The subject line read, "Urgent, showrunner removed, new direction approved." I opened it and my stomach dropped. The network had decided to remove the original female showrunner, the one who understood the depth of the story, and replace her with a male executive who wanted to reframe the tone. His idea? To portray Tyler as a misunderstood man and make my character more flawed and likable. I called an emergency meeting. I walked into that room filled with suits, agents, and executive producers, and I told them one thing. This story does not exist without the truth. If you rewrite it to protect a fragile ego, you lose me. And if you lose me, you lose the story. They looked stunned. Then one of them said, "You signed the contract." I smiled. "Yes, I did, but you clearly did not read Clause 21. There was a pause. Then I pulled out the contract copy and pointed at the paragraph I had requested when the deal was first drafted. One that gave me full final creative control over any portrayal based on my personal life. It was notarized, signed, and ironclad. They backed down. The original showrunner was reinstated 2 days later. But that little stunt reminded me of something crucial. People will always try to take control of your story once it starts to shine, especially if you are a woman, especially if your story does not end in tears. I would not let them. Not anymore. I began receiving letters from women across the country. Women who had been silenced, pushed aside, gaslit by partners and families. Women who had been told to shrink, to submit, to sleep in garages of their own, emotional or literal. And I answered every single one. Because it was never just about me. It was about what happens when a woman stands up, after being knocked down by the people she loved the most, and decides not just to survive, but to win. And then came one last unexpected message. A job offer. From a leading publishing house. Not to write my story, but to lead a department dedicated to helping other women tell theirs. They said, "We want someone who has been through it, someone who fought her way out, someone with fire." I accepted, because I had spent too long being quiet. It was time to help others roar. I had moved on in every way that counted, emotionally, financially, spiritually. But closure is a strange thing. Sometimes it shows up in unexpected forms, wearing the face of someone you thought you would never see again. It happened on a cold Wednesday morning. I was at the publishing house, finalizing a lineup of memoirs for the new series I had launched, Voices Uncaged. It was going to feature real stories from women across the country, stories of silence, survival, and strength. My assistant buzzed me. "There is someone here asking to see you. He said he is your brother-in-law." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had not thought about Logan in a long time. Tyler's younger brother, the only member of his family who ever showed me kindness. Quiet, always in the background. He had moved to Oregon years ago and disappeared from all the family drama. I walked to the lobby. There he was, taller than I remembered, a little older, but his eyes were the same, calm, observant. "Hi, Amelia," he said softly. "What are you doing here?" I asked, cautious. He took a breath. "I came to tell you something about Tyler." I stood still. "He is in jail." I blinked. "What?" "He was arrested for fraud last week, identity theft too. He had been taking out loans using fake profiles, forging signatures. They found everything after one of his fake investments turned out to be tied to a laundering scheme." My lips parted, but no sound came. "I know you probably think this is karma," Logan said. "Maybe it is, but I also thought you deserved to know that. You were never crazy. You were never the problem." He paused. "And Joyce? She had a stroke last month, minor, but enough to shut her up for once." There was a flicker of something in his face. Not quite smugness, but the kind of peace that comes after years of holding your tongue. I invited him for coffee. We sat for an hour, caught up, talked honestly, for the first time ever. He told me he had cut ties with the family after what they did to me, that he had moved away to find his own peace, but he never stopped watching from afar. He saw the story explode online. He read every article. Then he pulled something from his coat. A photo. It was a picture of me and Aunt Marion from years ago. He said he had found it in one of the storage boxes from the old house. Joyce had kept it, buried at the bottom of a drawer. "She hated you," he said, "but she never stopped being obsessed with your life. She watched every step you took, right up to the day she lost everything." I looked down at the photo. I was smiling in it, young, full of hope, holding a birthday cake I had baked myself. "I think she knew," I whispered. "She knew I would never stay small forever." After he left, I stared out the window for a long time. The sky was pale, snow beginning to fall. And then my phone buzzed. It was from the show's lead producer. "We locked the final episode. I thought you should know." Everyone cried. I smiled, just a little. But there was still one more thing I had to do. I returned to the old neighborhood, to the house. It had long since been sold, renovated, painted over. A new family lived there now. Kids played in the yard. A dog barked happily near the porch. I stood across the street, unnoticed, invisible in the best way possible. Not the broken woman who had once stood barefoot in a garage. Not the wife who had begged for affection from a man who never deserved her. I was something else now. I was my own beginning. As I turned to leave, a little girl ran up to the edge of the lawn and waved at me. "Hi," she chirped. I waved back. "Hi there." And in that tiny moment, I saw it. The full circle. A house once filled with silence, now filled with laughter. A space once cursed by cruelty, now blessed by innocence. I walked away without tears, without anger, just peace, real peace, and the certainty that sometimes the best revenge is not destroying someone else's world. It is building your own, brick by brick, until it is so strong they cannot even find the door. The woman they put in the garage? She built an empire, and this time it belongs to her, and no one can take it away. If this story moved you, made you pause, or reminded you of your own strength, then it was meant for you. Sometimes the people closest to us try to break us when we are already down. But survival is not just about getting through the pain. It is about rising from it stronger, smarter, and unshakable.